Hello everyone, welcome to another GIS Tech Tips video from Surveying and Mapping, also known as SAM. In this video, we're going to explore methods to export data stored in a geodatabase out to a shapefile using ArcGIS Pro 3.x. When you find yourself needing to export data to a shapefile, there are a few steps you need to make sure you follow. First, make sure you remember those limitations that are associated with the shapefile format. We discussed those in greater detail with our GIS Tech Tips video on understanding shapefiles. We'll go ahead and review those again a little bit later in this video to ensure they're fresh in your mind. Next, make sure you review the data you're going to export. Verify whether it has anything that violates the limitations with the shapefile, because that can cause problems down the line. And again, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Lastly, make sure you know the different tools and methods within ArcGIS Pro that you can use to export out to a shapefile. And we'll also demonstrate some of those here a little bit later in the video. So now let's kind of do a quick review of the limitations associated with the shapefile, because it's really important you remember what these are, and keep in mind that shapefiles were originally developed in the 80s and 90s, so they're built on old technology. So if you look here on the side, you can see many of the limitations that we've talked about before, that shapefiles store vector data only, that a single shapefile will either store a point, a line, or polygons. You cannot mix and match those entity types. There's size limitations associated with these. Again, if you think back to the 80s and 90s and the capabilities of the computers back then, that makes sense. We talked about limits on the null values and the fact that in a shapefile you can't have a null or a blank value. It's going to fill those in with zeros. There's also limits on file names and field names. So field names and file names need to be limited to 8 characters, must start with a letter, contain no special characters other than an underscore. 255 fields is the maximum number of fields that can be in the attribute table. But there's some other things that you need to know as well, such as field types. There are certain field types that are not supported, such as raster and blobs. Those are not going to be allowed within a shapefile. We also talked about no rules or behaviors are allowed to be stored in shapefiles. Another thing that I don't think we did mention, but I wanted to bring up here, is that shapefiles also do not support true curves. So these are things you need to keep in mind. So if you're looking at your data that you're going to export, and you look at things, say, for example, the field name. You have a field name in the attribute table that's longer than those 8 characters. When you go to export from the geodatabase into the shapefile format, that field name that's longer than 8 characters is going to get shortened. And it may get shortened in a way that's not easily recognizable to what it originally pointed to, especially if you have several fields that are longer than 8 characters that share, say, a common prefix, like name underscore something, or something along those lines. So keep that in mind as you're going. And here's another example of a limitation. As I mentioned, shapefiles do not support true curves or arcs. So if you have any spatial data in your geodatabase feature class that you're trying to export to a shapefile that has that true curve, what it's going to do when you run that export, it will export the feature, but the curve is going to become a straight line. It's going to generate the line that goes from the start of the curve to the end of the curve, or arc. Arcs, curves are interchangeable in this situation. So the spatial data itself is not going to be consistent. And that's important to note as you export the data out, because the results are not going to match one another when you do that. So let's go ahead and jump into ArcGIS Pro and work through this method and demonstrate some of the tools, because like most things with ArcGIS Pro, there's multiple ways and tools that you can use to export data that's stored in a geodatabase feature class out to a shapefile. So let's go jump in and take a look at those. Okay, so here we are in ArcGIS Pro, and you see in this map that I have 4 layers inside the map that I'm going to want to export out to a shapefile. Now if I click on the List by Source button up here, you can see all of these layers are referencing feature classes that are stored in the Trippville_GIS file geodatabase. That's what the GDB extension means. So none of these are shapefiles. They're all geodatabase feature classes. So I want to export one out. So let's start down here with parcels. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. Now, as you may remember, we want to verify that this feature class doesn't violate any of the limitations associated with a shapefile. So to do that, we're going to first open the attribute table. Let's take a look at the data contained in the table. So you can look down here at the various fields that are associated with this layer. Now there do appear to be a few field names that may exceed the limitations of a shapefile, such as the centroid X coordinate and centroid Y coordinate. You can see there are spaces in there, and it's certainly longer than 8 to 10 characters. So we need to verify if that is indeed going to be a problem, because there's a chance that these aren't the real field names, but they're instead field aliases. So to check that out, we're going to go up here to the ribbon, click on the Data tab, and then click on Fields. This is going to display the properties of the fields that are in that attribute table. So if we look closely at where it said centroid Y coordinate and centroid X coordinate, we can verify that those are field aliases. Field aliases are just more descriptive names that are associated with the field. The actual field name you see here. So it's just cent_X and cent_Y. So this is within the limitations associated with a shapefile. So that export will not be a problem. If we go back, we also see that there are no null values. There are some blank values, which are fine, especially if these are text fields. So you can see both lot num and street num are text fields as well as street names. So those are okay. Those are going to be blank. That's acceptable. So we don't see any reason that this is going to be a problem, at least from the attribute table. Next, we want to verify are there any other attribute rules or contingent values or things associated with this. So if I click attribute rules, I can see there are none here, so we're good there. So we'll close that. Then we'll look at contingent values. There's no contingent values there, so this is advanced behavior that is supported in the Geodatabase, but not in a shapefile. So we see no problems there. The last thing we want to look at is the database itself to see if in that Trippville database, I'm going to have to add that connection in here. Let's see if I go to favorites. Is it there? Nope. So let's add the database connection here. So I'm going to add that in. There's the Trippville database. So from there, I'm going to expand that out and look in the base where the parcels are at. You can see there's the parcels. We don't see any sort of topology or geometric network set up in this feature data set. So that advanced behavior is also not going to be an issue. We're not going to lose anything there. So we've validated or verified that there's no obvious limitations or restrictions that would violate the requirements for a shapefile. So we're good there. So I'm going to shut that down for a moment. Now if I go up here in the contents pane and right click on this layer, I can go down to data in this menu that appears, and you see the ability to export features. Notice I can export table as well. I want to do more than just the table. I'm going to go export everything. So I'm going to click export features. So it opens up the export features tool window here. The input is already filled in because I right clicked on the layer to get to it. So it automatically populates that. Now I need to set what my output feature class is going to be. Now by default, this is going to go to the default database associated with this project, which you can see over here as the little house on it, right? Because I don't want to go to a geodatabase, I'm going to go to a shapefile. I'm going to click the Browse button. Then I'm going to pick the folder that I want to export to. So it's going to be this folder. And then I'm going to give it a name. We'll call it parcels_export. Click Save. Now, because I set this to a folder instead of a geodatabase, it automatically designates it as a shapefile, as you can tell by it having the .shp file extension. Okay. Now, there's other settings if I wanted to refine the export by applying a filter to it, change some field mappings if I wanted to do that, or aliases, set up different sorting with doing this. I'm not going to set any of those. I'm just going to click OK. So with that, it has now exported that shapefile. And if I look back here in my table of contents, or I'm sorry, my contents pane, you can see this new layer has been added. Go back to here, you can see it listed in there, right there. But you can see the source is in this folder. And if I go to the properties and go to source here, you can see that it's a shapefile feature class. So it successfully exported the parcels geodatabase feature class to the parcels export shapefile. Okay. And I can further verify that by going back over here to the folders that you can see. There's the folders, and then you see the shapefile we just created. Right? So that's one method to export to a shapefile. Now let's look at some other methods and other issues that we may encounter. So let's go up to this next buildings MP. So this is building footprints. Let me go ahead and turn off the shapefile I exported there. So buildings MP are the building footprints here. So again, I'm going to open the attribute table to examine it. So I look through here and I've got object ID, shape, number of floors, estimated height, building type, building status, and photo. So again, it appears that we may have fields that are longer than are allowed in a shapefile. So let's check that by going back to the Data tab and the Fields button and seeing the field properties. So once again, I can see that those are just aliases. The actual field names are not an issue. What I do see here is this photo field is a raster. Raster field types or data types are not supported in a shapefile. So this could be a problem when we export to a shapefile. So let's see what happens when we export this out. So I'm going to close that down. And to show you what I mean by raster, if I click on and identify that particular building, you can see there's a picture of that building here. So let's go ahead and export. I'm going to do this differently than I did the parcels layer. I'm going to go up to the Analysis tab, click Tools, to open my geoprocessing pane. I'm going to come under Conversion Tools here, and down here where it says To Shapefile. So you can see the feature class to shapefile script. I know this is a script, a Python script, because of the little scroll icon out next to it. So I'm going to click it, open it, so it opens the tool in the geoprocessing pane. Now, because I didn't right-click on a layer to access this, I have to populate that. However, if I click the little drop-down arrow, it's going to give me the list of all the layers that are currently available in the map. So we're going to go with buildings_MP. Now, the nice thing with this specific tool is I can actually export multiple shapefiles, or layers, I should say, at a time. So say I want to do the street center lines as well. So I can go ahead and do this. Now what it's going to do is output a new shapefile that has the same name as the feature class. In the output folder, I'm going to designate. So I'm going to pick a folder here by clicking the Browse button. Pick the folder I want, which is going to be that one. Go OK. And now I'm going to click the Run button down here. So it's run successfully. If I want to view the details, I can open that up and see what it did, how long it took to run. Close that down. But now I'm going to go back to Catalog. Now, unlike the feature export that we did with parcels, it did not add the new shapefiles automatically as a layer to the map. So I'm going to add those in just a second. First, I'm going to refresh the folder that I saved those to so I can see there's the buildings underscore MP shapefile. I know it's a shapefile because of the green icon, and the same with the street underscore centerline shapefile. So I created two shapefiles using that script tool. So let's look back here at the buildings MP shapefile. Go ahead and add this to the current map. You can see it added it in here, and again, I can see this is from the Geodatabase, this is from this folder, so I know this is the shapefile. I'm going to open its attribute table, and I want to set it up so you can see this side by side with the one that references back to the Geodatabase feature class. So you can see the object ID field has been replaced with a FID, FID, which stands for feature ID. It does the same thing as the object ID, so that got replaced. The shape field is in there. However, it's been redefined as not just a multi-patch, but a multi-patch M. But still supported, no impact in general terms on that. Number of floors, but instead of having the alias in there, it just brought the field name across. Same with estimated height and building type. Same with building status. Notice what is missing, though. The photo field that was a raster did not come across. That got truncated or left off the export because shapefiles don't support raster field types. So there's an example of what happens when you have data in a feature class in a geodatabase and you export it to a shapefile. It will remove that data. Okay, so let's close that down and do our last one, which is this. Well, let me look also at the results of the street center lines first. So we go back to street center lines here. I wanted to point out or show you this because we have this full underscore street underscore name field. So again, is that an alias or the actual name? So we go back to the data tab and we go to fields. And if we scroll down to where that is, you can see that's actually the field name, and that contains more than 8 to 10 characters. So what happened to that field when we exported to a shapefile? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to add this shapefile to the current map and open that attribute table. And we'll scroll all the way to the end. So you can see here it shortened that field name. So it's just full underscore street. So it took it from full underscore street underscore name to this abbreviated name. So again, imagine if you had several fields that were street underscore something that were longer than the limits, how that could cause an issue or concern or confusion if you export to a shapefile. So lastly, we have one other layer that we want to convert, and we're going to use yet again another tool to do this with. So that's the manhole Z, and again, let's open the attribute table to see if we have any issues with it. It doesn't appear that we have. We do have some null values here under condition, as well as basin, as well as starting invert. So let's see what happens, because remember, shapefiles don't support null values in the attribute table. So let's run that conversion. We'll leave that open. And again, I'm going to use a different tool to do this as well. Go back to Analysis and Tools. And this time I'm going to actually go to the tool set that says to Geodatabase in our conversion toolbox. And then go down to Feature Class. Oops, let me go. Is that what I want? Let's see. I'm sorry. No, I want to go to Export Features. So this tool, and then I'm going to go down and pick Manhole Z as my inputs. Again, I'm going to click the Browse button to set my output feature class. So I'm going to go to Folders and here, double click it, and then we will call this I can type manhole export. And click Save. And again, notice it puts the SHP on the end, so it automatically knows that it's going to be a geodatabase. And it was successful. It ran that conversion. No problems, no warnings, so we're good there. And this time it actually added it to the map. So let's open that attribute table and see what happened. So notice that these fields that were listed as null no longer are null. The text, they're blank, but we're starting invert here because this is a numeric field, had null values. It populated those with zeros. Okay, so they're no longer left as null. They actually have a zero value where it was null. So again, changes the data from what we had here to what we ended up with. So it's important, again, to note that these kind of things will happen when you export from a geodatabase out to a shapefile. Again, because of the limitations associated with the shapefile, most of these come with the fact that the shapefile is such an old data format. Thank you for watching the video. Hopefully you found the information in it to be useful and helpful as you too navigate through some of the capabilities of ArcGIS Pro. If you do need training, please feel free to reach out to me on the contact information shown on the screen. Sam is very happy to help provide training for ArcGIS Pro as well as other applications. So thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.